Hi, I'm John Knowles, software trainer for Adobe, and in this video we'll be talking about audio. All the facets of working with audio inside Premiere Pro, including editing, mixing, adding effects, and even using AI tools to enhance your projects. Let's dive in. Okay, I've got my sample project open here. We're cutting an advertisement, and we have some dialogue and some sound effects, some room tone, ambiance, and some music. And I need to cut another piece of music down here onto track 5 next to the other music clip here. You'll notice that that track is already labeled music. I'll show you how to do that. You can label all the tracks in Premiere Pro if you like. So I've got the music over here in the bin. Double click, load that in the source monitor. Now I have several ways to bring this clip down here into the timeline. I could set in and out points like so. So I'll go to where the music is supposed to come in. I'll set an in. I don't need an out because I already have an out here in the source monitor for that clip. And I need to move the track patch here on the left side here. These are the patches. A1 is going to go to A5. And I'm just going to do an overwrite edit, which is this button here, or use the keyboard shortcut. And there it is. Just dropped it right in. I could also just grab it like so. Pull it down and drop it into place. Or I could have pulled it directly from the bin into the timeline as well. So any of those methods will work depending on how you want to do it. I'll just do a quick save here. I'm going to clear that in and out point.
All day.
All right. Music cue is in place, but it is way too hot. We can see it's already peaking here in my meters. So we need to bring down those levels. Let me zoom in a little bit here. I'm just going to pull the wheels out. Fit that in. There we go. And I'll make that track just a little bit taller here. There we go. So we can see the waveform is obviously really hot. It's hitting the top of the track there. So we can bring down the volume a little bit. We could also adjust the gain if we want to. Now, one thing we don't have in Premiere Pro is the kind of drop-down shortcut menu that allows you to select gain versus volume here. You can see there's an audio gain option right there. So they're separated. If you want to adjust gain, you can right click on it and this pop-up window is going to come up here, and you can either set the gain to a specific level. You can adjust the gain relative to where it's at. That gain is pretty much pegged at 0. So if I were to adjust the gain by -12, it would lower the highest peaks to -12, for example. Boom, there we go. This is non-destructive, by the way. I'm gonna use the keyboard shortcut I have assigned to jump right back to that without having to right click on it. And I can then push the gain back up, 12 decibels back up to the top. Go back there to the same menu. And we also have options to normalize. So that's gonna bring things down to whatever level I set it to. Max peak will take the highest peak in the audio and adjust the other waveform peaks accordingly, kind of exponentially along with it. The normalize all peaks will just take all the peaks and set them to the same level. So you've got options in there right now, and below that it's showing the peak amplitude, which is the loudest part of this clip, is there at 0, which we knew. Now I'm going to go to normalize max peak, and I'm going to take it down to -12 like so, and there we go. So the highest peaks there are going to be at -12.
As soon as I wake up, drip, I get out of the shower.
All right, that's pretty good there. And then I can now adjust the volume independently of the gain. The difference there being the gain is affecting the entire clip, and volume is something that you can actually keyframe. So individual segments of that clip can have different levels. We control volume in several ways. One of them right here is this white line running through the clip here. That is my volume keyframe line, and without any keyframes, it's just affecting the overall track. As I pull and drag, you can see a little pop-up menu right there. It's telling me how far down I'm reducing the volume. So I'll pull it down an additional almost 6 decibels there.
Drip. It just fuels my everyday life. What good is winning if you can't enjoy it?
So I can just ride that and see how it sounds against the rest of my audio. You can also adjust that in the effects controls panel. Twirl down volume here for audio, and you can see that there is a level section right here, and that's where I can set keyframes if I want Quick tip, the volume line in the effects controls automatically has keyframes assigned to it. You'll notice the stopwatch is already lit up. The minute you start adjusting things, you're going to be setting keyframes. So just keep that in mind. If you don't want that to happen here in effects controls, just turn off the stopwatch. And if I want to set keyframes, obviously I'll keep that stopwatch on and I'll get my first keyframe diamond there. And I can have another one here if I want. So there's different ways to do keyframes here. Now, if I want to do keyframes right here on the timeline, I can use the pen tool. And for example, I'm going to, right before her dialogue comes back in, I'm going to set a couple of keyframes here and then just push up like so that the beginning of that music track hits nice and hot right before it has to duck down while she's talking.
All day, every day.
A little hot there. I'll bring that back down.
All day, every day.
Now, if you want to keyframe something else, like let's say panning, you can right-click on the clip, show clip keyframes. Right now we're on volume level. You can go down to panner, for example. Let me solo that track, and I'll just pull the panning line like so, all the way down, and it's just coming out of the right channel, or pull it back up, and now it's just coming out of the left channel. And I can keyframe that as well. So you have different options here as to which keyframe line this white line represents. I'll go back to level. And actually, if you don't want to see any of the keyframe lines, go here under the wrench and down here, show audio keyframes. Just deselect that and that white line will go away and you don't have to worry about inadvertently grabbing it and moving it. Now, let me show you a few quick ways to manipulate audio once you have it down on your timeline. I'm going to open up another sequence here where I've got two interviews strung together, and I want to do some L cuts and some J cuts here to bring in the audio before I bring in picture. And there's a few different ways to do that. When I click on one of the clips, they will both be highlighted in white. This tells me that the audio and the video are linked together, and you can verify that by looking closely. You'll also see a little V and an A1 and an A2 inside brackets. That means that those are linked together. If I want to unlink them, I can just quickly select it, right-click, and unlink is the option there. And notice that the brackets went away, and if I click on the audio tracks or the video individually, they are no longer linked together. And I can relink them if I want, just by reversing the process and choose link. You can temporarily disable linking in the sequence without having to actually unlink the clips. That's what this button up here in the top left of the timeline panel means, linked selection. If I turn that off, it's as if I had unlinked those clips. They are still linked together, but that button temporarily disables that, and I can then drag them and move them around. I could do an L cut or a J cut just by manipulating the video only. Select that button again to relink everything. Now there's also another quick shortcut without even having to touch that button, and that is just using the option key. If you hold down the option key and select video, for example, you will only get the video track. Same thing for one of the audio tracks there as well. And by holding down the option key along with one of the editing tools, I can very quickly manipulate those edit points individually if I want, by just holding down the option or alt key modifier without having to manually unlink or throw this switch up here. All right. So 3 different ways to adjust video and audio separately. You can manually link or unlink them. You can use that toggle switch at the top of the timeline panel to temporarily disable linking, or you can use the option or alt key to individually alter the video or the audio tracks separately while still leaving the actual clip linked together. Now, going back to this sequence here, if you want to move clips around, you can just click and drag. There's also a keyboard shortcut for moving them up and down. I'm holding down the option key on the Mac, alt key on Windows, and just using the up and down arrows on my keyboard here. And if you want to make sure that you drag it without moving it in time, so in other words, it's not changing its position, just going up a different track, hold down the shift key. That's the modifier there. You only need to hold down 1 key instead of 2 keys on the Avid. Now let's talk about the track header, which is the section at the very beginning of the timeline here relating to audio, and we unsolo that track there. So you'll see this is the base setup for all of the audio tracks in Premiere Pro, and you can alter how these look, but The default here is to obviously have a lock, which will lock the whole track and keep anything from moving or shifting around. You've got the name here, and those are numbered, and those are also the track targets for things like copy and paste. Once something is in the sequence, it will paste to the target if you want it to. Next to that is the sync lock, and we have the same sync locks here on the video side. One note of caution with sync locks, it isn't always apparent that the sync lock is on or off. That slash that you see if you turn the sync lock on or off, it doesn't really stand out that much. So I like to just leave those alone. And in fact, sometimes I even hide them because I don't want to accidentally throw a whole timeline out of sync. Next to that, you have your mute switch, which will mute only that track. You can mute multiple tracks at the same time. And next to that is solo. Now you notice compared to Avid, throwing the solo switch on a track does not automatically mute the other tracks. The mute is implied. And the reason being is you can actually solo several tracks together. You don't have to worry about it just automatically switching and muting everything else. So if I just want to hear the first 3 tracks together, I can solo all 3. The rest are automatically muted. This will come in handy if you have a timeline with 20, 30 audio tracks and you want to select 2 to be heard at the same time, for example. Next to that, we have a microphone button. You can record live voiceover right there on the timeline. That button dictates which track the voiceover is recorded to when you set up your microphone in your settings or preferences. If you don't need that, we can remove that button. And how do we do that? I'm going to, first of all, pop open that track here. I just double clicked right here in the gray area to quickly pop open that track height. And I can still adjust the track height like so by just grabbing in between that track and the next track, making it even taller. Notice that the waveforms also get taller. Right now in Premiere Pro, this is the only way to increase the size of the waveform, not actually increasing the gain represented by those waveforms, but just visually change that sizing. Right now, just changing the track height is the only way to do that. So that's how you can adjust it like so. And double click very quickly to close it down. Quick tip here, if you shift double click, it opens all of the tracks to the same height at the same time, and then shift double click to quickly close all the tracks, collapse them down to that skinny height right there. Now up here in the wrench menu, notice that down here at the bottom, you've got minimize all tracks. That's a quick shortcut there, or expand all tracks. We'll pop them open again. If you like the size of these tracks and you want to make that a preset so you can jump right to it, go to the wrench menu again, and down here you see Save Preset, and you can assign a track height preset there. You've got 10 options, and I'm just going to call this track height 1. And that keyboard shortcut can be set up in here under keyboard shortcuts, track height. And there you can see track height preset 1, and it would just need to assign that to a key on the keyboard, and then that track height would automatically snap to that height that I've adjusted there. And again, shift double click to close them all down. Now, I mentioned being able to modify this header and the information that's visible. Notice here, this first track here is labeled lav for the mic that was used. That's only visible when the track is open. I'd like to actually see that all the time. So I go down here to customize, and there we go. And I can move things out of these buttons that I don't want to see. So for example, I want to get rid of voiceover record. I just click and drag it out. Now, sometimes that doesn't work. This thing can be a little finicky, and I'm glad it actually didn't work right now so I can show you what to do. I'm trying to get the microphone out of this box and it won't go. So the trick there is just very quickly hit reset layout, and it goes back to the basic layout there. And okay, now that's doing what I wanted to do. I grabbed the microphone and I pulled it out and it went away. And I'm gonna do the same thing with the sync lock, because again, I don't want to mess with sync lock. I never use it, so I just want to get that out of the way. And now I'm just left with the mute switch and the solo switch and the keyframes. Now I want to add something from the button bar. I want to add the track name, which is just represented as a button up here. It just says A1, but know that that is the actual track name. I'm going to grab that and pull it onto the very first line. It is right there. It's a little faint. If I hit OK, there it is. You can see now, even if the tracks get very skinny, the track name is now visible because I pulled it up to that top line when I customize it. It is right here next to mute and solo. The track name is on the same line. And until I pop that track open, I won't see these other options down here, which is this show keyframes button, and then this quick little selector that will allow me to quickly hop between the audio keyframes on that track. The other things I can add from the button bar is, for example, track volume. So if I want to see adjustments to the track volume itself in a decibel format, I can drag that. I'll put that in the middle. I also have a mini track meter. If I want to see bars bouncing on all the tracks, I can put a little track meter in here as well, and a left-right balance for the panner if I want to add that adjustment. And I hit OK, and that is the new track header. And if I make a new sequence, very quickly, I'll just do a quick stereo sequence like so. You'll see that the same track header configuration carries through. So you can set this up once and you don't have to do it again for every new sequence in the project. That setting will remain. Now, so far the audio we've been working with has been stereo, mono, but what happens when you get multi-channel audio from the field, something with multiple microphones on different tracks? How do you cut that into a sequence? And how do you strip out the channels that maybe you don't need? You want to do that before you start cutting. So let me show you how to do that. Here in the project, I have a multi-channel clip that was brought in. That's from the interview footage. You can see I've got 4 channels of individual audio here. We make a new sequence here. I'll just do a basic stereo sequence, nothing fancy. And I'll call that multi-channel source audio. All right, there we go. I'm going to highlight all 4 patches for my source input and just drag that down. There we are. I've got all 4 channels. Now, what's on these channels? I may have to go through them individually and mute and solo to figure out what is in there. I don't see that audio information listed here, but if I go to the metadata and go down here at the bottom under, yeah, there it is. We've got IXML data here, and that's typically what is recorded by on-set sound mixers, and I can look at their track 1. Aha, here we go. Here's some information. So track 2, track 3, track 4. I've got mix left, mix right, boom, and let's see, journey. That's probably the lav down here at the bottom. So while I'm cutting with this, I can choose to just work with the stereo mix or the boom or the lav. I want to make that decision before I start cutting, so I don't have to constantly sit there and mute and solo these individual tracks every time I cut this into a sequence. So let's say I just want to work with the stereo mix. I'm going to right-click on that clip in the bin and go to Modify Audio Channels. All right, and here I can see all 4 of those channels and tracks here. There are 4 audio clips listed. Each one of them is mono. And I'm going to change the number to 2. And there we've got clip 1, clip 2, channel 1, channel 2, like so. That's going to give me the mix left and mix right that I identified from the metadata. Now, there is an option here to apply changes to all matching clips in a sequence. What that checkbox means is if you've already cut this clip into a sequence with only those 2 channels, you can modify the channels that are in those 2 channels, but it won't strip out or add to the channels that are already in place. Let me show you what I mean. So I've got that clip already here on the timeline in its original 4-channel, 4-track configuration. I just changed it to 2, and I'm going to hit OK. And I get a warning. Changes to the source channel, the clip channel format, or number of audio clips will not affect clips already in a sequence, but will be applied next time. Notice that nothing happened to the clip here on the timeline, but the source clip is now reduced to 2 mono tracks. And if I bring that into the sequence, that is now 2 mono tracks. And every time I grab that and pull it into a sequence, it's going to be those 2 mono tracks. So that setting did not affect that first clip that was here. So I'll delete that. So what is that little checkbox for there in the Modify Audio Channels dialog box? Well, let me show you. Let me pop these 2 open here. Audio 1, Audio 2, and I can see it's A1 and A2. Now, if I go back in and re-modify that multi-channel clip this is non-destructive. I can bring all 4 tracks back if I want to, or I can change what audio is going into those 2 clips, those 2 tracks that I originally made here. So instead of 1 and 2, which was the stereo mix, I'm going to bring in just the boom and the lav. So instead of 1 and 2, I'm going to bring in 3 and 4. So I'm looking at the boom and the lav and not the stereo mix. And you can see right there at the head of the track, it said channel 3 and channel 4 instead of channel 1 and channel 2 like I had originally. Now you can still modify these clips once they're on the timeline as well. I'm going to grab this second instance here, right click, and I do have audio channels as an option there as well. And this is very similar to what we just saw in the other dialog box. In this case, I am going to switch this one back to 1 and 2. And this only affects that clip in this instance on the timeline because I did not modify the master clip here in the bin. And you can see that one is set back to channel 1 and channel 2. So again, if you have multi-channel audio in your bins and you want to condense it and maybe only bring in a couple of tracks, change it by modifying the audio channels in the bins before you start cutting it into sequences. You won't be able to change it once it's already in those sequences if the number of tracks changes. All right, but if you have the same number of tracks and just want to change the channels that are going to those tracks, you can do it. This will come in handy when you make multicams and you're syncing your dailies, for example, and you just want to add a couple of microphone channels out of a 5 or 6, 8 channel mix that came out of the sound mixer. You can do it that way. It gives you less things to focus on while you're editing, and you can just cut with the stereo mix, for example, and then swap that back to the individual microphones as you continue your cut. Jumping back to the ad here, I want to show you some different panels you can use to manipulate volume and channel controls here on the timeline. If I go under Window, I can choose the Audio Clip Mixer or the Audio Track Mixer. They're 2 separate mixers we have here. Here's the Clip Mixer, for example. They're also available in a dedicated workspace. If I go to Window, Workspaces, I can choose Audio. And that's going to open up both of those mixers and reconfigure all of my panels into a custom audio workspace. You don't have to use this one. It's the one that came packaged with Premiere Pro. You can obviously make your own. This is similar to the audio workspace button you may find on the right-hand side in Avid, and just jumps you right to this customized audio workspace. Now, this workspace condenses several panels over here on the left, such as the project window and the effects and media browser and so forth. You can just skinny those up a little bit if you want. Pull this over. Mainly what it did is it added the clip mixer, the track mixer, and the essential sound panel over here on the right, all of which I will cover momentarily. Let's go back here to the clip mixer, and let me put the playhead over this clip right here, and let me make sure that the audio keyframes are on, and I'm going to open up all of my tracks. There we go. So in the clip mixer, you can use these pots here to adjust individual clips on the timeline. So while it's playing, there we are, I can pull the volume down on audio 1, and that is affecting just this clip right here on audio 1, which is also labeled lav. And you can see the volume line is adjusting accordingly. And if it's parked over another clip down below, I can go down there to ambiance, and I can change that and bring that down a little bit, so that air conditioner, or pump the air conditioner up. So in the clip mixer here, we're just affecting individual clips. We also have these small panning knobs here at the top to adjust the left and right pan, and you can see down below
And my mom
where the music, for example, or the sound effects are peaking. Now, we don't have anything similar to Avid's global adjustment setting, for example, but there are ways to apply a change to one clip to all of the clips on the same track, for example. Let me show you how to do that. So this clip here, there's the lavalier. It's still a little bit low. I'm going to boost it.
do track and field.
That sounds better. Now, I want to apply that same volume adjustment to all the clips on that track. There we go. I'm going to hit copy, select the other clips, right click, and go to paste attributes. And there I can add things on the audio side, such as volume. And that volume adjustment is then going to be applied to all of those clips here. Make sure I grab this first one, do the same thing, paste attributes. And this can be hotkeyed, obviously, to a keyboard shortcut. And so that's one way to do it. Just adjust one to the way you want it, copy it, and then paste that adjustment, that volume in this case, to all the other clips on the track. In Premiere Pro, we can also use the track mixer. Now, these pots are adjusting the volume for an entire track, not the individual clips. So in this case, I want to bring down the level of the music. That is on A5 here.
Has succeeded.
Way too loud. So if I just bring down the volume like so.
And I knew that it was the best. All day, every day, as soon as I wake.
There we go. And that is adjusting the volume for the entire track. So both of these music clips here will be lowered simultaneously. I'm not affecting the volume of the clip. I'm affecting the volume of the overall track. You can see what's happening there by selecting down here track keyframes volume. Right now it is on clip keyframes, but watch what happens to the white line if I select track keyframes volume. See that? That white line going through both of those clips and extending past it, that is showing me the track volume. And if I raise that pot in here, that white line will adjust accordingly. Now, you may not need to adjust track volume at all, but it's a handy tool for just quickly raising or lowering levels for an entire track, especially if you've got the same type of media on that track, whether it's all music, all sound effects, all dialogue. Just quickly raise and lower the whole track. Another thing to be aware of is if someone else has been cutting the project and handed it off to you, and if the audio levels sound weird in any way, check the track mixer. Make sure they haven't adjusted any of the pots, because visually you may not know that the track has been affected at all. If you don't have this volume line on, if this is back here and set to clip keyframes, you'll never know that the track volume was adjusted unless you open up the track mixer and see, aha, it's been pulled down. This is why I often add the track volume option. Remember, we added that when we customized the header. We added track volume here, and I can see visually the track was set to -6, which I can adjust right here inside the track itself on the sequence. You can see the pot is moving inside the track mixer. You can always tell the difference between the track mixer and the clip mixer visually, because the panning pots here at the top are much smaller on the clip mixer. They're much larger here on the track mixer. And there's also some buttons above. Now, if you want to add transitions to your sequence, we don't have the quick transition button like we have in Avid, but we do have the keyboard shortcut to add a default transition to a cut point. So you just select the cut point like so and use your keyboard shortcut. In this case, mine is mapped to Option or Alt T. And there it is. It added the constant fade between the audio and then a dip to black on the video side.
He's very disciplined.
Now, if you just want to apply the audio transition, let me just hit undo. The keyboard shortcut is the Option or Alt key like we did before to only select the audio side. In this case, I'll do both those tracks, holding down the Shift key and the Option key at the same time, and then apply it default transition. It's also there in the right-click menu, and it will only apply it on the audio side and ignore the video. That way I get a little smoother transition.
He's great.
Those audio clips there. Now, the default transition itself is set here in the effects panel. I'm going to twirl down audio transitions, and there it is. Crossfade is already opened, and the default transition has a blue highlight around its box like this. If you want to change that, so here it's under constant power, I want to make that default transition constant gain. I just right click and set selected to default transition. And now if I set another default transition here, that one will be a constant gain instead of constant power. There we go. Then you can set the duration of that transition by double clicking on it, and there it is. It's set to 16 frames. I can make that 12. Or you can set a default transition length in the settings under timeline, and you've got video transition default as well as audio transition default duration. There it was set to 16 frames. I can change it to 12 right there, and then all the transitions I set from now on will be 12 frames. Now, if you want to add transitions to multiple clips at the same time, you don't have to set in and out points like you would in Avid. You can simply select the clips and tell it to add the default transition just using the keyboard shortcut, and it will add that default transition to all the clips you've selected. And again, if you don't want to add that to the video side, let's say I just want to do that for the audio, I'll just lasso everything with that Option or Alt key held down, which will allow me to select only the audio side of things. And then when I hit my keyboard shortcut to add the default transition, it just adds it to all the clips on the audio tracks and ignores the video tracks. Now, if you want to add effects to a clip on the timeline here, I'm going to select it. First, I'm just going to solo that track 1 so I can just add it to one clip at a time. And I'm going to deselect link selection. That way I can just grab that one clip. There we go. And I'm going to go here in the effects browser and I'm going to twirl down audio effects. And let's see, I can add a 10 band equalizer like so. Just drag and drop it right there. It shows up in effects controls up here. And you can see there is the effect, and there's usually an edit button like this, which will actually bring up the user interface for that effect. So there's the 10 band equalizer, and I can choose from some low cuts, some high cuts, things like that. Down here, vocal presence boost, give her a little boost.
My 400-meter hurdle coach, his name was Benny Brazil.
Let me close this panel here. Now I can add some reverb here. I can drag and drop once again, or with the effects controls open, you can just grab Studio Reverb right here and just drag it into effects controls, and they'll just stack up here. And that one again, I hit edit, and I can change that to, let's go to Great Hall.
Loves all of us, and he pushes us very hard, which is what a good coach and mentor is supposed to.
All right, and if you keep adding more effects there, they'll just keep stacking. And if you want to quickly A/B it by turning it off to hear how it sounds without it,
personally,
just hit that little effects badge right here to toggle that filter on or off. And if you don't like it, just click on it, hit the delete key, and it goes bye-bye. Now, let's say you want to add an effect to an entire track, affecting all the clips that are on that track. Let me show you how to do that. We don't have anything like the audio track effect tool in Premiere Pro compared to Avid, but we do have our friend, the track mixer. And hidden up here at the top, it's a little twirl down arrow, show, hide, effects, and sends. When you open that up, this is actually an effects panel, and you can add an effect here that will affect the entire track. Again, you have to be in the track mixer. This is not available in the clip mixer. So the way you add an effect up here, you click on the little drop down here and you pull up this menu, which matches the audio effects available over here in the effects window. And here we can then go again to reverb. I'll go back to Studio Reverb, and you just double click on the name to bring up the same panel here. Go back to Great Hall. And now we'll play through.
With the head coach at LSU. His name's Dennis Shaver.
Yes, I did. I started out at University of Washington. I did.
All right, so now that reverb is applied to all of the clips on track 1 here in the track mixer. And again, there's that little effects badge. You can quickly hit that to turn off the effect. Now, Premiere Pro has great audio effects and filters built in, and you can do a lot of mixing and sweetening right there on the timeline without having to send it out to another audio editor. But what happens if you're like me and you're someone who's not as comfortable with dealing with sound and is more of a video editor? And I might get a note from a producer that says, hey, can we make this person sound like they're coming out of a radio or a telephone? Now, that's probably in a preset somewhere in one of the effects, but I don't know where to find it. And I'm not as familiar with how to use that filter. So what do? Well, there's a great system built into Premiere Pro called Essential Sound that reduces complicated tasks into very simple and easy to understand terms. Let me show it to you. So here I've got my clip, and I want to make him sound like he's coming out of a telephone. Over here, I've got the Essential Sound panel ready to go. If I click on it, it asks me to tag it. And this is an important first step here. What am I manipulating here? Is it dialogue, music, sound effects, or room ambience? Now you can choose auto tag here, and you can actually select all the clips in your timeline and hit auto tag, and it will try to determine what they are. And it's fairly accurate. In this case, I'm just going to manually tag it as dialogue. That's step 1. Once you've done that and it's tagged, this whole thing opens up, and there's all types of options in here. There are repair options for cleaning up bad audio. We'll get to those here in a second. And there's some vocal enhancements, enhanced speech, auto match loudness, for example, that will bring it up to a particular level. You see that automatically jump the waveform.
Did that when I started out at 5 years old.
Now here's my favorite part. At the top here, there's a preset browser with very easy to understand terms for affecting the audio. And right there from the telephone is just a quick drop down away.
100 and 200 were my events. I was pretty decent for a big guy.
Now, what it's doing under the hood is actually adding the appropriate effects into the effects stack. If I look at effects controls here for that clip, I can see it's added a graphic equalizer and a dynamics processor to get that from the telephone voice. Essentially, those are shortcuts that allow me to pick a term that I recognize from the telephone, and it'll just add the appropriate effects without me having to know which ones those are or which presets to choose. It's a really handy system. Now, if you want to get rid of that audio type, in other words, strip out all the changes that you've made, you can just click this clear audio type button and it removes everything. You see they're gone from effects controls, and this no longer is tagged as dialogue. Now, there's another great use for Essential Sound, which is cleaning up bad or damaged audio. So here I have another sequence, and this is the same coach footage, but in this case, they forgot to turn on the boom microphone or the lav, and all we have is the camera audio, which is not so great. So we need to clean that up. I'm going to click on that clip here. It's a stereo clip now, just sitting there in a regular standard track. And I'm going to tag it as dialogue. And I have some options here for repair. So I can try to reduce noise. I can hear that camera noise in the background. Let's try that now.
Just a little stretching and some drills. Get your feet warmed up.
Bring up the volume there by clicking auto match. And I can reduce the noise further and try to hit it with some clarity.
Just a little stretching and some drills. Get your feet warmed.
So you can see that that helped the voice a little bit, but it's really far too damaged for those tools to have an effect. There's a brand new function that is just out of beta, and it's called Enhance Speech. So let me clear this out and retag it as dialogue. And here at the top now, in Essential Sound, you see Enhance Speech, and there really is just a button that says Enhance. It's going to initialize, and if you haven't used this before, it actually, Creative Cloud will download it to your computer. It needs a whole package here, and it's using some AI tools based on the language that's being spoken to try to figure out how to clean up the voice. Let's take a quick listen.
Up. Then after that, well, just a little stretching and some drills with a feet warmed up, and then.
So already it's sounding so much better than it was before. You can control the amount that is being mixed into that with this slider right here. Take it all the way up.
Just a little stretching and some drills.
Now he sounds much, much closer to camera now, as if he was properly mic'd, but there's a little bit of tinniness, a little bit of robot to his voice. So I think around about the middle or a little past would be a good spot to mix there.
Just a little stretching and some drills.
All right, that's getting us there, and then we can still add on top of that. So I'll hit reduce noise because I can hear the camera.
Get your feet warmed up, and then we'll dive into the meat of the workout.
All right, so he's sounding a lot better. Now, there's an option to also use Adobe's website to process this. This enhanced speech tool is being processed on your machine. If you want to upload it to Adobe's website and allow that to process it, they have a much more robust model there, and a lot of times the results sound a lot better. It's just you have to wait longer because you have to upload, let it process, and bring it down. That website is here at podcast.adobe.com. It was originally built for podcast use, and then they realized that video editors would really love to take advantage of this as well. It's still called Podcast, though, on the website, and here you can go to Enhance Speech, and you're allowed to drag and drop audio here as long as you have a Creative Cloud subscription. Just choose a file from your computer or drop it right here in this box. Allow it to process, and you can also change the strength here, which is sort of similar to changing the mix inside your program. And then once it's completed, you can download it there. They have a choice of whether to upload it or do it on your computer. If the audio isn't too bad, it just needs a little bit of adjustment, try the Enhance button in the Essential Sound panel first and see how it does and adjust the mix accordingly to remove any tinniness from the voice. If the audio is really damaged, like the example that I showed you where maybe he was mic'd incorrectly or there's a lot of wind or it's really crunchy audio, give Adobe Podcast a try on the web. Allow Adobe servers to process the audio. The results may surprise you. Now, there's another great feature in Essential Sound, and it has to do with music. It's called Remix. This allows you to shorten or lengthen a music track without having to blade it and find your own loop points and things like that, the way we normally have to shorten or extend a song when we don't have access to alternate lengths. Let me show you how it works. So here we have a cut down of our commercial, and obviously our music track is way too long, so I'm going to select it, and over here in Essential Sound we need to tag it as music. That opens up this panel here, and you need to turn on duration. There's two options in here, stretch and remix. We want remix. We're going to turn that on. And target duration right now is the full length of this track, which is 34 seconds and 12 frames. I want to make it as close as possible to my target length, which is a 15-second spot. Now, you'll notice next to target duration, we have a margin of plus or minus 5 seconds. That's because not every song is the same. Not every piece of music that you're going to try and change with remix is going to be identical, and it won't automatically go to the length that you set it to. It's going to have a margin there based on things like the tempo and the beats per minute. There's only so much it can do, and it tries to keep the song with the same cadence and the same beat. So with that in mind, we're just going to plug in 15 seconds and see what happens. There we go. So that plus or minus 5 seconds brought us to 18:05. If I go 1 second shorter, let's see what happens there. Okay, now that's brought it down, but this music actually ends here, and the length is this kind of fade out here at the back. So I'm going to go back to that 15-second option and see how that sounds.
It just fuels my everyday life.
Ooh, look at that. Perfect. Kind of ended on a beat there. I can just chop it off if I want to. Make that extend a little bit. So that got me pretty close. Now you'll notice here there's these white lines here, these crinkle cuts as I call them. Those are the loop points. They're called segments. This is where Premiere Pro actually made some cuts and move things around. You can increase the number of segments, which gives you a little more flexibility sometimes over here under Customize, right below Duration. And that was set to a maximum of 5. I'm going to crank that all the way to 10. And that might give me some more options in there. By the way, there is a dedicated tool for lengthening this track right here on the timeline. You don't have to plug numbers in over here in Essential Sound. You can go down here to the third tool down where Ripple Edit, Rolling Edit, and Rate Stretch live. And below that is the Remix tool. Looks like a little musical note with 2 arrows. And you can use that to grab the edge of the track and pull it. And now I'm making it longer than it originally was. And I can keep going. So this tool works either way. You can make a track much, much longer or much shorter. It just found natural loop points, kept the same tempo, the same beat, and just automatically looped the music in those areas. You can make this song very, very long. I had a friend of mine tell me he did 24 hours was the limit. He was able to make a 24-hour version of a track. So sky's the limit here with Remix. It's a little harder, obviously, when you're going shorter because that's dictated by the tempo of the music. But here, there we go. That sounded pretty good. And there's other options here. We have variations, melodic or harmonic. You can play around with this slider, see what sounds better. Melodic tends to be better for single instruments or perhaps a strong vocal, and harmonic is for more complex tracks, more instruments. So that is Remix. Now I want to show you one more feature in Essential Sound, and this is called auto ducking. We've got another cut down here, and it's a little bit different. We have some interview footage of our athlete mixed in with the commercial footage here, and we have a very strong music track underneath. You notice it's already been remixed to fit here very nicely.
I was being recruited. I actually had a close relationship with...
Now this music is obviously way too hot to be underneath this vocal here, but we do want the music to be up at the beginning and the end where there is no dialogue.
So when I was being recruited...
So we're going to have to duck the music underneath the dialogue here, which would normally involve adding keyframes, bringing things down like so. You can actually do it in one step by initiating auto ducking right over here in Essential Sound. In order for this to work, you have to make sure that the thing you want to duck against, in this case, the audio of her interview, you want that to be tagged as dialogue. You can see I already have it tagged as dialogue. I have some enhanced speech and some other things turned on here for these 2 dialogue bits. And then I'm going to click on this music, and that has been tagged as music because it's already been remixed. And below that, you see ducking. There we go. And the first thing it's going to ask is, what are we ducking against? Well, in this case, we've already tagged our vocals here as dialogue, so we're going to duck against dialogue. Well, you've got other options. You could duck against other music or sound effects or ambiance. And right off the bat, I'm just going to generate keyframes. That's a button down here at the bottom. And I will adjust these controls as needed once I see what it does by itself. There we go. All right, see that? It automatically added keyframes here at the beginning and the ending, but it did add some keyframes here towards the middle, it did detect some gaps in the dialogue. Let me expand these tracks a little bit so you can see there are indeed some gaps here where she is not speaking, but only for a short amount of time. I don't really want the music to ride up during those moments. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to increase the sensitivity. Now, this may seem counterintuitive. You want it to be more sensitive to the dialogue. No, that's not actually what it's asking. It's increasing the threshold at which it will detect those gaps. So if you turn it up higher, it's going to not detect quite those smaller gaps there between her sentences. And all I have to do here is click generate keyframes again. I don't have to delete these and start over. I just regenerate. It's going to redraw it. All right, I need to turn up just a little bit higher. One more time. There we go. Now I just have my keyframes here at the beginning and the end. Let's take a listen.
So when I was being recruited, I actually had a close
All right. And let's take a listen to the music here.
relationship with
It's still a little bit loud. So what I can do is I can bring the duck amount down. I'll go -16. Regenerate the keyframes. That lowers it a little bit. Now the fade duration sounds pretty good. I think it's fading in and out quickly enough for my taste, but I think it's coming in a little bit too early. So I'm going to change the fade position here and regenerate keyframes. There we go. See how it's bringing the keyframes in a little closer to her dialogue. I want it nice and tight. Try that one more time. There we go.
So when I was being recruited, I actually had a close studio.
Sounds pretty good. So that is auto ducking. No more tedious keyframing. Just set your dialogue tracks to dialogue or whatever you want it to duck against. Go ahead and tag it, grab your music, and turn on ducking. Tag it against that type that you selected earlier, and generate keyframes. Now, as I'm recording these lessons, I'm working in Premiere Pro 24.3. There are some new audio features in the Premiere Pro beta that very possibly by the time you watch this will be in the new shipping version of Premiere Pro. So I'm going to show them to you right now, and I'm going to switch over right now to the beta, and I want to show you some things here on the timeline. We now have some interesting options here for manipulating audio on the timeline. You notice the colors, first of all, are different. They've changed the label colors here in the new version. Now, I have this track 1. Now, you'll notice, first of all, when you make the tracks as skinny as possible, it's closed up all the way, you can still see the waveforms. That's really, really great. So even at the smallest possible track height, you can still see waveforms, which is really nice. I'm going to open that right up like so. And I'm going to click on this track here. You'll notice now that we have dynamic audio faders, as we would in an audio program like Pro Tools, for example, or Audition. We can just grab this little square now that appears in the corner and pull it over, and that now is a fade out. So I have 2 interviews here back to back.
And I think just by graduating, I did that.
So I've got a fade going on there, and just by grabbing that square, you can manipulate how the curve of that fade is. It doesn't have to be a pure linear fade now. All right, it's got some Bezier curve to it, so you can play with that how you want. Or you can very quickly and easily create a crossfade by grabbing that square and pulling it across the transition point between the 2 clips. And now I have a crossfade between these 2 pieces of dialogue. And you can change the nature of that crossfade. You can do constant power, constant gain, exponential, just by pulling down or pulling up. And that influences how that crossfade will sound. So you can do that right here on the timeline without having to add the actual effect from the effects panel or using default transition. There's also some other features here. We have a little shortcut. You see there's a little symbol of a person talking here. If you click on that, that's going to automatically open the Essential Sound panel. That was the tag for dialogue. That's going to pop you right into the dialogue panel where you can enhance, repair, change the loudness, and so forth. And there's also a little effects badge now in the corner that's going to pop you right to effects controls. So again, depending which version of Premiere Pro you're using, you may or may not see these features. Go ahead and seek out the latest version if you want to play around with these. They're really, really great new additions to the program. That's it for working with audio in Premiere Pro. Hopefully now you see where everything is and you feel a little more comfortable making the transition from your other NLE into Premiere Pro. I'll see you on the next one. Thanks for watching.